Today we will start our first biology class for class 9. Let me first introduce myself. I am Shritoma ma'am and I am teaching you from Kolkata. So we are all stuck in the pandemic. You are from different parts of India and I suppose other parts of the world also. And I am sitting in Kolkata. I will be teaching you a little bit about me. I have been teaching for 15 years and I am still learning. Although I'm teaching, I'm still learning from the questions that you ask. You keep me motivated to learn more. I do like teaching. I have completed my PhD, but then I have a great interest in sports. So I also swim, I play tennis. I'm sure all of you, have your own area other than studies that you like. So please keep on pursuing that even if you are at home at this point of time while we also study. Now during this entire course I will be taking classes online. There will be online classes on Thursdays 6 p.m. for class 9, and today we will start with the introduction to the cell. But before I start with the introduction, let me remind you that we have classes for class 10 physics, chemistry, mathematics and biology, 9 physics, chemistry, mathematics and biology, and also for class 8 for CBSE board. So please spread the word, and your friends or whoever would be interested, please let them know so that they can join. We also have classes for ICSE class 9, 10 and 8 for physics, chemistry and maths at the moment. So please let them know. We also have classes for Java, Python programming and physics and chemistry for Cambridge IGCSE courses. Okay, so do spread the word, do let people know so that we can have more people in our community. Before I start, okay, so I will start today's class with 3 questions. The first question is, have you ever seen a cell with your naked eyes? You can write your answer in the chat. Have you ever seen a cell with your naked eyes? Okay, so most of you are saying no. Only one person has said yes, and that is Alia. Alia, can you tell me which is the cell that you have seen with your naked eyes? Okay, now some of you are saying that you have seen a cell with your naked eyes. Onion cell, okay, some of you are saying that you have seen an onion cell with your naked eyes, which is not really possible, but yes, I have got the answer. Some of you are saying that you have seen an egg, which is actually a single cell, which you definitely have seen with your naked eye. So egg is basically one single cell. It is a single cell which is visible even without a microscope. Okay, now the second question is that you have seen an egg cell, fine, but can you see all cells with your naked eyes? Can you see all cells with your naked eyes? Of course not, because cells are microscopic. That is, they are so small that it is impossible to see them with our naked eyes, and therefore we need something to see them. So what do we need to see a cell? What do we need to see a cell? Yes, many of you are giving me correct answers. In fact, all of you are giving me correct answers. We need a microscope to see a cell, right? And you know, the microscope that we can use to see a cell can be a very simple microscope to a compound microscope. It can be a light microscope. It can be an electron microscope. So this basically depends on how closely you want to see different parts of the cell. Okay, so you can actually see a cell with a simple microscope or a compound microscope, but if you want to see structures which are inside the cell, if you want to see structures which are even smaller than the cell itself, then you will need an electron microscope or maybe other high power microscope which can give you that view into the cell. But who was the first to observe a cell? Who was the first to observe a cell? Can you identify this person? Who was the first person to observe the cell? Yes, it was Robert hook, right? And this is how he actually saw the microscope. So what he did was, he made his own simple microscope, and in under that microscope he observed, he sliced up a small portion of the bark of a tree. You know, just beneath the bark there is another layer which is known as the cork. Okay, you must have seen a cork, you must have seen a shuttlecock. So there, just beneath the bark there is another layer which is known as the cork, and that layer is what he actually sliced up, and he looked at it under the microscope, and he saw structures like this. So basically a honeycomb shaped structure where he saw boxes like this. Okay, and he called these boxes cell. So he was the first person to name these hollow chambers or the boxes that he saw under the microscope, or under his microscope that he had made. He called them cell. But he could not actually, the cell that he had seen, he never saw a nucleus inside it. He never saw cytoplasm inside it, because cork cells are dead cells. So what did he do? He made his own microscope. He made very thin slices of cork, which is the layer present just beneath the bark in a tree, and then he saw these, you know, these kind of cells which are here above, and these cells looked like a honeycomb. They looked like empty chambers, and he called them cell, which means small chambers. But he did not see any nucleus, he did not see any cytoplasm, anything inside, because he was the first one to observe these cells, which were actually dead. Cork cells are dead cells. Okay. Now in certain books the spelling of the spelling of hook would be H-O-O-K. In certain books it would be H-O-O-K-E. So stick to one spelling. Whatever spelling you stick to, just stick to one spelling. Okay. So cell here, as he named it cell, means a small chamber. It's a small chamber. So he called it a cell because it looks like a small, it looked like small chambers. Alright. Now after that, this was Anton van Leeuwenhoek. So Anton van Leeuwenhoek was the first to observe a cell which was living. So what kind of cell did he observe? He observed cell which was living. And where did he get the cell from? So this was the microscope that he made himself. Okay, and he used it to see the cells, and the cells that were obtained from pond water. So in the pond water, the cells that he saw were all living cells. So he was the first to observe living cells under the microscope that he had made himself. But you know, these are very old microscope. These are very old type of microscope, very simple, which use just only one lens to magnify. Okay, but later on we have devised microscopes which can use more than one lenses to magnify the image. So just imagine this: if you have one microscope which has one lens, let's say the power of the lens is 100x. So your microscope magnifies the image by 100 times. But let's say if you have two lenses, one lens is 100x, another lens is just 10x. 10x means 10 times multiplication. So then how much multiplication would you do? So first your image will be multiplied 100 times, and then it will be multiplied again 10 times. So you will get 1000 magnification, right? So in compound microscope, in case of compound microscope, we use two sets of lenses. That is why we call them compound microscope, because we have two sets of lenses. So let us see what are the structures of the compound microscope. So this part is known as the base or the foot of the microscope, on which the entire structure stands. Okay, this is the arm, this is the arm of the microscope. Okay, this is the body of the microscope, and this is the stage. These are the basic structures, but you need the lenses. So, where are the lenses? This is one lens, or these three are one type of lenses which are known as objective lenses. Okay, and this is another lens which is known as the eyepiece lens. Now, in a compound microscope, as I have already mentioned, there are two types of lenses. So, one is the objective lens and the other one is the eyepiece lens. I will tell you in a little bit what they do. Let me talk about the other structures. Now, here you have a mirror which is a plano-concave mirror. Okay, so do you know what is a plano-concave mirror? A plano-concave mirror is a mirror where one side is plane and the other side is concave. So, a plano-concave mirror is a mirror where one side is plane, that is straight, and the other side is concave. What is the speciality of a plano-concave mirror? The speciality of the plano-concave mirror is that it takes light coming from different directions and focuses it at one point. So, basic function of a plano-concave mirror is to collect light coming from different direction and focusing it at one point. So, it collects light coming from any direction and focuses it basically. So, whichever direction light is coming from, it will be focused towards the stage. Now, here there is a small opening through which light can enter, and on the stage you will place your object that you want to see. Okay, and then the rest of the magnification will take place. I will tell you how it takes place. Let me first tell you the functions of the different parts. So, the plano-concave mirror, the function of the plano-concave mirror is to converge light, coming from different directions. And where does it converge? It converges it towards the stage, because on the stage you will place your specimen that you want to see. Okay. Of course, the objective lens and the eyepiece lens, their function is to magnify, and here you can see we have three objective lenses. Usually in a compound microscope, the magnification of these objective lenses are 10x, 40x and 60x. So, three lenses, one would be magnifying it 10 times, another one would be magnifying it 40 times, another one would be magnifying it 60 times. Now, depending on what magnification you need, you can use that objective lens. Okay. So, this one, the 10x one, is known as low power. Okay. Whereas these two, they are known as high power. Eyepiece lens usually has a magnification of 10x. Eyepiece lens usually has a magnification of 10x. So, it is usually a low power one, but there are compound microscopes where the eyepiece lens can have much more magnification than 10x. Okay. Now, the problem is you have the stage and you have your specimen on the stage, but you have to move, the lenses so that you can bring the object in the focus of the lens. All of you know that a lens has a focus, and if the focus shifts, the image will be blurred. So, to bring it to the focus, we have two screws here. The first one here is known as the coarse adjustment screw, and this one is known as the fine adjustment screw. Now, what does it do? So, what does the coarse adjustment screw do? So, when you are rotating the coarse adjustment screw, the entire body, this entire body of the microscope can move up and down. So what happens if here let's say here your specimen is present and this is your lens, you can move the lens up or down and therefore bring the object to the focus of the lens. Am I clear? So to bring the object to the focus of the lens, you might be required to move the lens up and down. So for moving that lens up and down, you have to move the body. So this body has to move up and down, and for that this coarse adjustment screw is there. And why is this fine adjustment screw there? The fine adjustment screw is there because let's say I have no power as such, okay. So I have adjusted the microscope and I want you now to see the specimen. But let's say you have a power, you have a positive power or a negative power, you have a normal eye power, you wear glasses. So when you come to see the specimen, because of your own power, although it is in my focus, it might not be in your focus. So then just by rotating the fine adjustment screw a little bit, you can bring it to your personal eye focus. So all of us have different lenses in our eyes also. So the fine adjustment screw is there so that we can bring the object to focus according to our own eye power. Okay. Now this round object here, to which the objective lenses are attached, this round portion, this is known as the nose piece. You know, if you had practical classes, you would be needing to operate a microscope, but now since you are not having practical classes, I will have to tell you how to use it. So this is known as the nose piece. You can rotate the nose piece. Alright, why do you need to rotate the nose piece? Let's say I want to use 10x. So then the 10x power should be here. Okay, the 10x power should be here. If I want to use, let's say 40x, then I have to rotate and bring the 40x power here. If I want to use 60x, then I have to rotate the nose piece a little more to bring the 60x power here. Okay, now why do I have to do that, and how does this thing get magnified? Okay, let's see the next slide, then you will understand. This is how the stage looks like from above. So you see, this is the stage. Okay, and as you can see, this portion is hollow. This portion is hollow. So light can enter through here. So all the light that the mirror was collecting will enter through this hollow portion, and this glass slab is known as the slide on which you have kept your object. This green thing is the object, and you have covered it with another small piece of glass which is known as the cover slip, so that the object does not dry, so that the object does not move. Now these are your objective lenses. This is the nose piece. This is the nose piece. This is the nose piece, and these are the objective lenses. So you see, you have to have the objective lens directly over the slide, directly over the object, so that the light from the object can enter into the objective lens. Okay, so that is why the nose piece is necessary. Now if I need this objective lens, then I have to bring the objective lens here by rotating the nose piece. Okay, so you rotate the nose piece and the other objective lens comes in the line, and then light will enter into this objective lens. If you want light to enter into this objective lens, then it is here, rotate it and bring it here so that the light enters into this objective lens. Okay, so this is the structure of the microscope. I will come to the explanation of how it works in a little bit, but have you understood the different parts? Have you understood the functioning of the different parts of the microscope? Please let me know that if you have understood the functioning of the different parts of the microscope. Then I will show you how light enters and from where light goes where. Alright, now let's move on to how the microscope functions. Alright, so I am drawing a straight line, okay, Of course, you have seen the structure, how it looks like, but I am drawing it in the form of a straight line. So, this is the mirror. Okay. This is the stage. This is the aperture of the stage. Okay. On the stage, you have your slide. This is your slide, which is made up of glass. On the slide, you have your specimen. Of course, the specimen is not this big, but I am drawing so that you can understand. Then, just above that, you have the objective lens. This is your objective lens. Okay. Then there is the body. I am not drawing the body. And then at the top, you have another lens, which is the eyepiece lens. So, how does it work? Light which is collected, let me draw light with orange. So, light which is collected by the mirror from different directions is sent to this aperture which is present near the stage, so that you get lots of light falling on this small specimen. The specimen is very small, and if a lot of light does not fall on it, then you won't be able to see the inside of the specimen. So, the light falls on the specimen. So, the mirror collects all the light and the light falls on the specimen. It passes through the glass slide and falls on the specimen. Then it passes through the specimen and enters into the objective lens. Now, when it enters into the objective lens, let us say I am using 40x objective lens. So, the light passes through the objective lens. The image here has already been magnified 40 times. The light again passes through another lens, which is the eyepiece lens, and let us say the eyepiece lens has 10x magnification. So, when the light comes out of the eyepiece lens, let us say this is your eye, you put your eyes on the eyepiece lens, you are okay, this eye looks horrible. So, let us say this is the eye and you are looking at the image. So, when this light from the eyepiece, so when this light passes through the eyepiece lens and falls on your eyes, how much times is it magnified? It was already magnified 40 times. You magnify it another 10 times. So, it is now magnified 400 times. Okay. So, I repeat, first the mirror collects the light. The mirror collects the light and focuses it on the slide. Okay. The light passes through the slide and then it goes into the specimen. So, the light passes through the specimen . After passing through the specimen, it passes through the objective lens. The light passes through the objective lens. Okay. Then again it passes through the light passes, the magnified light from the magnified image passes through the eyepiece lens and then it falls, then it enters your eyes. And you can see a magnified image. Okay, so this is how a microscope works. Okay, so you have asked certain questions. Let me take a few questions here that you have asked and then I will move on. Sushant is asking, ma'am, what if the shape of the gap circle becomes a rectangle? Doesn't matter, as long as there is a gap, as long as there is an opening through which light can enter. It doesn't matter if the opening is round or rectangle, because your specimen will always be smaller than that gap. Okay. Rohit is asking, what is an aperture? An aperture is an opening. An aperture is an opening through which something can enter. An aperture is an opening. Okay. An aperture is an opening through which something can enter. Okay, let me see what other questions I have. Goirik is asking from where light enters the slide. So as you can see, Goirik, light from the mirror enters through the small opening that is present in the stage, and then it enters into the specimen or the slide. If I show you the previous slide, you will be able to see light is coming from below. So this is the opening of the stage, and light is coming from below, and then it is entering through the slide into the specimen, and then it is going into the objective lens. Okay, is there any other question? I want want you to tell me if this concept of how a microscope works is clear to you. Please let me know. Okay, fine. So since it is clear, let us move on to the next one, where there are two activities given in your book. The first activity is observing an onion peel under the microscope. So for this you need an onion, and when you see the onion, you take if you take the scale of an onion if you just take the scale of an onion, let's say this is the scale of an onion, what we have as an onion is this onion scale, you will see there is a very transparent, thin, transparent layer in the inside of the onion peel. Okay, not outside, inside. So you use a forceps and you just peel it, and you will be able to see that a small membrane comes out, and this is known as the onion peel. So basically you take the onion, open one fleshy leaf, and in the inside of the leaf you will see that there is a very thin transparent membrane. You take a tweezer and you just peel off that leaf, and you will see that it comes off. That is known as onion peel. Okay, and this onion peel, if you just stain it, now we are going to stain it. What is staining, or what is a stain? What we do is we put the peel, that transparent sheet which is made up of a layer of cell, in a colored pigment, which is going to stain the inner content of the cell. So you put it inside the stain. Here the stain that we are going to use is safranin. There are other stains also, but safranin can be used for plants. Iodine can be used as a stain. If you are using safranin, it will give a pink to red color, okay, depending on how strong the stain is. If it is iodine, then it will give a purplish color, okay, depending on how much starch present in it. And then you put it on the slide under the microscope, and you will see cells like this. Now these cells, they have very, very prominent nucleus. See, these are the nuclei. They have very, very prominent nucleus. This is the nucleus. So they have very prominent nucleus, and even you can see the border of the cell very clearly. So this colored portion is the cytoplasm. Okay, this part is the nucleus, and this part that you can see, the boundary of the cell, is cell wall. Now in a plant cell, since the cell wall is present and the cell wall is thick, therefore you can see the cell wall very easily. The boundary is very clear, and as you can see, the shape of the cell is rectangular. There is a specific shape of the cell in case of an onion peel, and the shape is rectangular. You can very clearly see this rectangular shape. Okay. The cell membrane cannot be seen because it is very thin and it is attached to the cell wall inside. So, you cannot really see the cell membrane. The cell membrane is not very clearly visible, not very clearly, the cell membrane is not visible. Okay. This is one activity. Now, this activity cannot be obviously done at home, but you can at least see the onion peel. You can peel off the onion, and let's see, maybe in my next class I might show you how to peel off the onion, and if possible then we can have a small activity there, but you do need a microscope. Without a microscope this activity will not work. Okay, but anyway, so this is the onion peel activity. Then to see an animal cell, we can see human cheek cells. Now, what are these cheek cells? So, the inner lining of your mouth is laid with cells which are known as epithelial tissue. Okay, these are known as epithelial tissue or epithelial cells. Epithelial cells, they line the inner lining of your mouth. We will learn about epithelial cells in the next chapter, tissues, in details. So, what we do is we use a toothpick. We scrape a little bit from the inner lining of our mouth without hurting ourselves. Take that scraping, you will see a white scrape has come out. You take that on the slide, and here we use the stain which is called Leishman's blue. So, you can see the color is blue. This is Leishman stain or the Leishman blue stain. Depending on how strong the stain is, you can keep the cell in the stain for 2 to 5 minutes, and then you put a cover slip on it and observe it under the microscope. The cells will look like this. So, here also what you can see is the cytoplasm is clearly visible. The cytoplasm is clearly visible. The nucleus is also clearly visible, right? But what is not visible is that tough boundary that we saw in case of the plant cell, which is the cell wall. So, you can see that you can understand that there is an end to the cell. So, this thin layer here is the cell membrane, but it is not very distinct because it is not like the cell wall. It is not as thick as the cell wall, because the cell wall is absent in an animal cell. So, here you just have the thin cell membrane. Okay. Now, what is the shape? The shape, as you can see, it is polygonal in shape. It is shaped like this. Okay. It is shaped like this, polygonal in shape, and the nucleus is always present at the center. Just like in an animal cell, the nucleus is always present at the center. In case of a plant cell, you see the nucleus. If you look at this plant cell, the shape is rectangular. They are almost arranged like bricks, one after the other, and usually the nucleus is present more towards the periphery. Okay, so the nucleus is present more towards the periphery. So, the nucleus is peripheral. In case of animal cell, the nucleus is at the center. So, the nucleus is central. And the shape is polygonal. So, if I ask you, if I just show you these two slides and ask you the differences between a human cheek cell and the polygonal cell, the onion peel cell, you can easily point out few differences. Okay, what are the differences? There is difference in shape, there is difference in the position of the nucleus, there is difference in, of course, cell wall, presence of a tough and a prominent outer covering, which is the cell wall. So, three differences you can easily point out. Okay. So, now that we have seen a cell, now that we have seen how animal and plant cells look like, let us try to define a cell. So, what is a cell? So, we say that cell is the structural and functional unit of the living system. Now, what does this mean? What does structural unit and functional unit mean? So, structural unit means that any tissue or any organ of your body, if you take it, any tissue or any organ, the structure of that tissue or that organ is because of the structure of the cell in it, and it is also because of the arrangement of the cells in it. So, let us say you have cells which are elongated like this. Let us say you have cells which are elongated like this, okay, and you take them and you bundle them together. So, you get a bundle where cells are like this. So your organ will have a shape like this. But if you have round cells, you take them into a cluster. Now that cluster can be round like this, or if you join the round cells one after the other, it can take the shape of a chain, or if you arrange the round cells in such a manner that it can take the shape of a cube, or it can take the shape of your kidney or your lungs or your liver or whatever. So the point is that the cell is the structural unit. This term means that the shape of the cell and the arrangement of the cell gives structure to your organs and tissues. Alright, so cell is the structural unit. Now why is it called the functional unit? It's called the functional unit because let's say you have your kidneys and your kidneys are forming urine. So if I tell you that your kidneys are made up of cells, but from today the cells will be on strike, so they will not function. Will your kidneys still be able to form urine? What do you think? No. So basically the functional unit, the meaning of functional unit is that whichever organ, whichever tissue you are talking about, the function of the tissue is actually the function of the cell that is making up that tissue. Let's say you are in class 9 section C, and if I tell you today, class 9 section C, you have to submit a chart to me, work together as a team, and you submit a chart to me next week. And some of you get the chart paper, some of you get the color, some of you think about the concept, some of you, draw, some of you write, and eventually the chart is presented to me. For me, the chart has been presented by 9C, okay? But who has actually worked? You. So consider yourself as cells working to make that chart, which is the overall function of the class. So similarly, your lungs are functioning. What is the function of your lung? Exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide, and that is happening because the cells are functioning. Your liver is functioning because the cells of your liver, they are functioning. So one day if your cells go on strike and your liver cells say that, okay, today we are not going to function, let the kidney cell take up our function. That will not happen. So each and every cell of each and every organ and tissue, they have their specific function. So that is why cell is known as the functional unit. Okay, and we can also say that it is the smallest living unit. What do you mean by smallest living unit? You might tell me why. Inside the cell there is nucleus, which is smaller than the cell. Inside the cell there is mitochondria, which is even smaller than the cell. So how can you say that cell is the smallest living unit? Cell is the smallest living unit because, can someone tell me what do you think, why am I calling cell as the smallest living unit? Why am I not calling mitochondria, or why am I not calling nucleus as the smallest living unit? Can anybody tell me why am I not calling nucleus as the smallest living unit? I have got a few answers. Yes, because they are not independent. Very good. This class is amazing because they cannot have independent existence. Only a cell with all its structure can have independent existence. And what do I mean by independent existence? I mean that they can form their own energy, they can form their own proteins, and they can break down food, they can carry out reactions, and they can also replicate or reproduce. That is, from one cell, 2 cells can be formed, from 2, 4 cells can be formed. Okay. So that is why it's called the smallest living unit, which is capable of self-replication, and it is delimited by a cell membrane, meaning whichever cell it is, it can be a cell of an amoeba, it can be a cell of a bacteria, it can be a cell of your body, it always has a boundary which limits it. It is not an open system, it's a closed system, and that boundary is known as the cell membrane. Okay, so is the definition of cell clear to all of you? Please let me know if the definition is clear to all of you. Okay, I do not get this. What is CC? Many of you are writing CC. What is CC? Crystal clear. Oh my God, you okay, fine. Thank you. That's a new abbreviation that I have learned. All right, let us move on to some cells which have different shapes. So as you can see here, there are 3 cells. I'll draw more. So this is the nerve cell. As you can see, nerve cell has a different shape. These are sperm cells, so they have a certain shape. These are red blood cells, so they have certain shapes. So all the cells in our body, they do not look alike, they have different shapes. In your book, you have diagrams of these different types of cells. I'll draw them one by one and I'll tell you what shape they are. So let us first talk about a smooth muscle cell. So what is the structure of the smooth muscle cell like? So for a smooth muscle cell, the structure is like this. It is called spindle shape. What is the meaning of spindle shape? Where the two ends are tapering and the center is broad, okay, and they have the nucleus at the center. This is called spindle shape. Let's come to the next one, that is nerve cell. So for a nerve cell, you have a cell body and 2 types of projections coming out from them. So a nerve cell is more or less like this. So this is the nucleus at the center. So this is the cell body, the main cell. These small projections are called dendron and this large single projection is called axon. I am not going into the details of it, okay. So their shape is also elongated, but it is not spindle shape. Then we have fat cells, okay. So fat storing cells, they are round or oval in shape. They have the nucleus at one corner almost pushed towards the periphery, and the rest of the cell is filled with fat. So this is fat, okay. So this is fat, this is the nucleus, okay. This is the cell of the adipose tissue which stores fat. So adipose tissue cell which stores fat, okay. Then we have the ovum, which is the largest cell of our body. The egg or the ovum is large. It has the nucleus at the center. It has 3 layers of membranes, okay. I am just drawing a little bit here. So this is the egg cell or the ovum, which is the largest cell of our body, okay. Then we have bone cells, which are star shaped. They have projections like this. They are star shaped. So this is a bone cell. Another name for bone cell is osteocyte. Cyte means cell and osteo is anything related to bone. And then finally we have blood cells. The shape of the blood cell is, it is disc shaped, meaning this is from the top, this is the top view, but if you look at it from the side, you will see that the center of the cell has a depression. So if you have ever had polo, I am sure you have had polo, mint with the hole, so that the polo has a hole in the center. Forget the hole, if it is just a tapering, then this is the shape. This is known as biconcave. Bi meaning both sides, concave meaning it is tapered or curved inwards, okay. So this is the red blood cell, RBC, or another name for red blood cell is erythrocyte. You will see all these cells, the shapes of all these cells are there in your book. I am just giving you different diagrams. And last but not the least, we have the sperm cell, which is just a second. So we have the sperm cell. Yeah, just a second, hold on. So this is the top view, this is the lateral view. So this is RBC or erythrocyte. Okay, and finally we have the sperm cell, where there is a head, then there is a small middle piece and then there is a tail. Okay, so the head has the nucleus, this is the head, this is the middle piece, and this is the tail, which is basically a flagella. Okay, this is the sperm cell, human sperm cell, which is the smallest cell of our body. Okay, no, the virus, the different virus have different structures, but this is not the shape of a virus. Okay, so these are the different shapes of different kinds of cells which are there in your book. So you can see the labelings. I have given you the labeling. So this is the nucleus. You can actually label nucleus, cell membrane and cytoplasm for all of them. So this is the cell membrane, this is the nucleus. You can label the nucleus and cytoplasm for all of them. Okay. Now coming to cell theory. So for being a cell, you have to have few basic characters. So today if somebody comes and tells me, you know, I am a cell, but if you are a cell, then there should be a basic characteristic feature. So three scientists, Matthias Schleiden, Theodor Schwann and Rudolf Virchow, they had, so Matthias Schleiden, Theodor Schwann and Rudolf Virchow, three of them had given a theory which is known as the cell theory. To be a cell, you have to have some basic characters. What are these characters? First of all plants and animals, microorganisms are made up of cells and their products. So no matter who you are either made up of cell or you are made up of a product of the cell. So you are made up of cell or your product if you are a living organism. Number two, the cell is the structural and functional unit for living organism. So if you are a cell, you are the structural and functional unit of the living organisms. And this last one was given specifically by Virchow in the year 1855, who said that cells arise from pre-existing cell, meaning one cell will arise from a cell that existed before that. So one cell will divide to give rise to two new cells. These cells will divide to give rise to two new cells, and this concept is known as omnis cellula acelluli. Okay, so this is known as the omnis cellula acelluli, or that one cell arises from a pre-existing cell. Okay, so of course the question that Lakshya has already asked, so how did the first cell come into existence? You know, when the first cell came into existence, it was a chance. It was by chance that the first cell was formed. But when the first cell was formed, the environmental conditions were way different from what they are now. It was very hostile. So there was, the temperature was very high. There were different kinds of gases in the atmosphere, not so much of oxygen. The water that was present in the sea and the ocean, it was really very hot, and there were chemical reactions taking place because of the frequent thunder shower and lightning, and by chance the first cell was formed. This was millions and millions and millions of years ago when life first originated on earth. But this cannot happen now, because that kind of a hostile condition is not present anymore. So now if a new cell has to be formed, then the new cell has to be formed from a previous existing cell. But if you can create that hostile environment, then you can of course if you can create that hostile environment, then you can of course theoretically create a cell, but we have not yet been able to do that. Okay, so all cells arise from pre-existing cells. So these are just three basic points of the cell theory. There are many, like for example, there are parts of the cell theory which says that a cell has a nucleus, that the cell has metabolic capacities, but then that is these three are classical cell theory, which are the three basic ones, but there are many more. It is a theory, it can be the new ones, some which we have proved, we can call it a law, but at that point of time when it was given, this was a theory, not a law. Okay, coming to the next part, where we understand that it is still we understand that organisms can be unicellular or multicellular. I will answer your questions, Rohit, just hold on. So now we know that organisms can be unicellular or multicellular. So what are unicellular organisms? Those which are made up of a single cell. Please give me some examples of single celled organism. Okay, amoeba, anything else? Paramecium. These are scientific, paramecium is a scientific name, so I am underlining it. Euglena is a scientific name, so I am underlining it. Chlamydomonas is also a scientific name, so I am underlining it. Okay, so amoeba, paramecium, euglena, chlamydomonas, they are all unicellular organisms. Of course, even bacteria is unicellular. And examples of multicellular, what are multicellular organisms? Multicellular organisms are those which are made up of many cells. And I hope I do not have to give you examples of multicellular organisms. In multicellular organisms, there are many cells, many tissues, and each tissue has a different function. Okay, so there's a very interesting question which Sushant is asking, is COVID or coronavirus unicellular organism? Virus, is actually an intermediate between living and non-living, and it is not even considered as a cell because it has no cellular components. It doesn't have cytoplasm. It doesn't have the cellular enzymes that are required. Its size is much smaller than the size of a cell, so it is not even considered a cell. So a virus is actually acellular, and it is an intermediate between living and non-living, so it can it is an intermediate between living and non-living, so it behaves as a living organism inside the host cell, but outside the host cell it behaves as a dead organism. And finally we come to some cellular discoveries. These are informations that you might want to know. So 1595, Janssen and Janssen formed the first compound microscope. 1655, Robert Hooke described cells in cork. 1674, Anton van Leeuwenhoek discovered living cells from pond water. 1831, Robert Brown described the cell nucleus. 1838, Matthias Leiden and Theodor Schwann proposed the cell theory. 1839, Purkinje coined the term protoplasm inside the cell. 1858, Rudolf Virchow said that cells develop from pre-existing cells, that is omnicelluli cellula or celluli. 1857, Albert von Kolliker discovered the powerhouse of the cell. He did not call it mitochondria, however. Carl Benda coined the term mitochondria, and Camillo Golgi described Golgi apparatus in 1898. Okay, so these are few discoveries. Here I do not have to really explain anything to you, you already know this. So quickly coming to the summary of today's class. So what have we studied? We have already studied today. So we have understood what is a cell. So we can define a cell now. Okay, definition of a cell. We have understood how an onion peel cell and a cheek cell looks like and their differences. Okay, we have also understood the discoveries of cells, who discovered what, who was the first to observe a cell, okay, under the microscope, who was the first to observe a cell under the microscope, living and dead. Okay, we have also understood the functioning of a microscope, parts and functions of a microscope. Now, if you have any questions, I'll quickly take few questions and then we can move on. Then I can end my class. So, do you have any questions?
And do check out the full courses for physics, chemistry, biology, maths and computer coding on our website manuchaacademy.com. I'll put the links below. Hope you like it and happy learning.